Welcome all, Raymond, Stream Gamers. Part two of this mini series here that we're doing, trying to give us a simplistic way of looking at how do we, in general, get tubeliners airborne and that kind of stuff, whether it be an Airbus or whether it is a Boeing. For those that are familiar with the cockpit, I am still in the A320. I had to pick an aircraft to do this with, and I decided to do an A320, the Asobo A320 version 2, because I don't have a lot of experience with this one, and I thought it would be just neat to do it with this one rather than something that I'm very versed with. I'm actually after the new the new simming group of people who are trying to get better and are inundated with so much acronyms and terminology that's confusing to them, and I'm trying to keep it kind of, for lack of a better word, dumbed down a little bit so it's not as complicated, and hopefully it's enjoyable. Okay, so to this point, we've actually set up the FMS/MCDU. That's been set up. We've imported our flight plan from our flight bag into our flight bag from SimBrief. We've put all the relevant, pertinent information in here. One thing I did not do, and I should maybe go back and verify, is the flaps right here. Let's talk briefly about the flaps. Now, you do need to tell Boeing, what your intended flap is, whether it's a 10 or a 15. In the Airbus A320, I'm trying to fly in the flaps, we will use flaps 1, okay? It seems to be a very simple thing to overlook, but it's really important that we have this in there, okay? Now, in the Boeing, as you go through those menus, it will ask you will need to tell it, what is your flap configuration, and I believe it's in the same area where the V speeds are. It'll ask you what is your flaps configuration. Okay, so we're going to use flaps 1. I won't be taking off with. We won't be doing a takeoff with this. Again, if somebody wants us to and wants us to go to the next stages and show, explain taxi and explain lineups and explain departures and what you need to do and how you need to get the aircraft airborne, down in the comment section and request that, and I will continue this series on to the next steps. Anyways, here we are. Today, now we're going to start talking about this here panel right here. I refer to this as the autopilot panel. I know there's another word for it. I know there's an acronym for it. I don't remember what it is, but to me, this is an autopilot panel. Boeing has a very similar autopilot panel, right? So here, we can display whether it shows in Mach or whether it shows in knots, okay? So if I want that to show in Mach speed, I press that. I want it to show in speed, I press that. I typically like speed, but it is what it is. You see the buttons that I'm toggling. I'm toggling it either from a managed speed setting or a manual speed setting. We're going to leave in the Airbus, and in the Boeing, we're going to leave it being managed. This is the indication that it's being managed. The same thing with the heading, okay? So the heading, you notice that line that was drawn in there, okay? When I turn that back on, that line goes away and it's going to tell us to fly that. But I could say, no, I'm going to go up here, I'm going to do a little loop-de-doop, and I'm going to bring it back in as a part of maybe what ATC might say we should do. So you can do that. It is not a bad practice if you're not going to be in managed mode to set this heading to your runway heading. And you can get that from little nav map. Look at your runway, in this case 18, and you can see what the actual heading is. 18 is referenced to the general heading that the runway faces. It's not the exact runway heading. Typically it is within a 5-degree upper and lower. So that's to say that if the heading was 177, it would be referred to as runway 18. If the heading was 184, it would be referred to runway 18 as well. Okay? Anyways, so the autopilot panel, that's your heading discussed. We have engagement of the autopilot. It's right here. We have our auto throttle engagement. We have expedite, auto approach, vertical speed, altitude. Boeing has all these same buttons. And the localizer, I didn't talk about that. They have all the same things. I'm going to explain some of these buttons, but not in great detail because I don't want it to be this overwhelming thing. So the dials are somewhat self-explanatory. Well, I want to set an altitude. There's my altitude. I think it was 38,000 is where we're going to. So there, I've got 38,000 set. My runway, I'm going to assume is the heading of, let's 181. So now I've done that. Okay. Autopilot. This is to engage the autopilot. Note that there's two autopilots here. In the 737, they have 4, I think. 777, they have 3. Airbus A380, I can't remember. Anyways, there is a need for these multiple autopilot buttons because if you do a category 2, 3, 1 approach, the airport has the ability to do an auto land and bring this and the Boeing on the ground by itself without you, the pilot, doing much of anything other than managing flaps and some speed. But otherwise, it will land the aircraft. But in order for it to do that, it needs to have an airport that is equipped for that. So, for the example here in the Winnipeg airport, runway 36 has a category 2 approach available to it, which is an auto land approach. And so this will allow, if you were coming in on 36 in Winnipeg and your aircraft was equipped for auto land, you could effectively auto land the aircraft. And how that happens is you fly the vast majority of your right on one of the autopilots, but as you get very close to the airport, some 10 miles, you will engage the second autopilot. If it stays lit down in this window here somewhere, it's going to give you an indicator. Whether it be a Boeing or an Airbus, you're going to get an indicator. I think in Boeing it says flare or something to that effect. In the Airbus, I can't remember what it is, but there will be an indicator here to say it is now locked on to the category 2, 3 approach. I think it actually says CAT, actually. And it'll do that for you, okay? And don't get too distracted with this stuff, but I want people to see and understand that these capabilities exist and that they exist on both aircraft. It's not just one, it's both, okay? Auto throttle, well, it's very self-explanatory. You can use the auto throttle here in the manage mode, hit the auto throttle, and then the manage mode that was put into here will manage that throttle for you. You can say, no, I'm going to put the auto throttle on, but I'm going to control the speed. I'm going to tell the auto throttle to go to 210 knots and hold that speed. The throttle in the Airbus must be in this location, somewhere between CL and between 0. And that is where the auto throttle function actually lives and exists, okay? In the Boeing, it doesn't matter. If you just set your speed to 210 knots, turn your auto throttle on, non-manage mode, it'll go to 210 and then throttle back and maintain 210. If you hit the manage mode or in the Boeing, it's kind of the same thing. If you let the FMS control it, now it's controlled by the FMC and by the flight plan how fast you should or should not be traveling in a particular location. So for example, we don't see our speeds here yet, but we will. There'll be speeds right here in this area here. Let me see if I can get to a place that actually shows that. Well, it doesn't yet, but it will. There'll be speeds in here, and it'll say, okay, hey, at this point, I need to be at a given altitude and at a given speed, and the FMS or MCDU in this case will manage that speed for you. It'll try to slow it down, speed up, descend, climb, whatever it needs to do. Okay, and the Boeing does the same exact same thing. We've addressed the altitude. We've got ourselves set for altitude. Here we can determine that we can say, no, we're going to leave the FMS MCDU control our vertical speed both up and down, Or we can say, no, we want to manually do that ourselves. And we can turn the dial and say, okay, I want to climb at 1,600 feet a minute. Okay. So that's what that's for. It will go back into manage mode here shortly. Yeah. Now, localizer. So localizer is from the receiving airport where we plan to land. It is projecting a beam, not up and down, but widthwise. It's projecting this wide beam out. And as the aircraft intercepts that wide beam, if you are in managed mode, letting the MCDU/FMS control that for you, it's going to line the aircraft up with the runway right to left. You will see an indicator when you get there in this location here, and it'll tell you whether you're right of the airport, left of the airport, whether you're too low or whether you're too high. Okay. I have a video that talks about this stuff a little more in depth, so I won't spend too much time with that. And if we do take this series to the next level, departure and climb out and all cruise and all that, then we'll talk more about it then. Okay, but that's what localizer does. Okay, auto approach does the other end of that, and that's the altitude. You know, do I descend? Do I climb? And there's a beam that's projected up and down like that, and the aircraft picks that beam up, and if you're on auto approach, it's going to put your aircraft at the right trajectory on its way down to the ground, so that it is, you know, at the right altitude all the way along its way. Typically that's a 3-degree glide slope. There are some airports that vary from that 3-degree glide slope based on terrain and, you know, that kind of stuff, but general it's usually a 3-degree glide slope. When you're in that mode, you will see a little indicator here. Boeing, again, you will see a little indicator. I think it's over here somewhere. But it will tell you where you are. Just suffices to say that if you see the magenta diamond, it's a little diamond that's moving up and down in here, or it's down here. If that diamond is above the center line here, that actually means your aircraft is too low and you need to climb. If the diamond is here, that means your aircraft is too high and you need to descend. Typically, the FMS and the MCDU will manage that for you. But if you find yourself necessary that you're way out, you can kind of look at that and say, well, geez, I'm way too high. I'm going to go do a go around, do a circle in, and come back in when I'm at my proper altitude. That's what this is. Now, it's been referred to me as chasing the diamond. And for a long time, I did not understand what that meant. Basically, what that means is you chase the diamond. If the diamond is up here, you have to climb and get to it. If the diamond is here, you have to descend and get to it. So you're kind of following the diamond. That's I haven't done a very good job of explaining that, but for me, that was really, really helpful. The fact that chasing the diamond means go to the diamond. Too high? If the diamond is up here, then climb to it. If the diamond is down here, then descend to it. Chase the diamond. Anyways, so that's what this means. Expedite is, hey, we're too high, and ATC says, hey, I want you to descend from flight level 160 or 16,000 feet to 10,000 feet, and you haven't done it fast enough. At some point, he's going to ask you to expedite, or you're going to see, I need to expedite. And so if you press the expedite button and set your altitude to the altitude that you want, it's going to stop worrying so much about what the flight plan is trying to do, managing altitude and speed. It's just going to start bringing itself down. Note that if it starts doing that, you might start to see your speed get out of control. Okay, and I won't spend a lot of time about this, but landing an aircraft, fundamentally, whether it's the Boeing or the Airbus, basically all you're doing is you're managing energy. Okay, that's enough of that. If you want me to, like I say, I've said before, I will take this series to the next level and go look at our departure and our arrivals. And if we get to that point, I will discuss that managing energy more so in that video. All right, now that's the buttons for the autopilot. and how it functions and what it does and what you need to know about it. Both Boeing and Airbus have these functions. All right, so what is left on our agenda? On our agenda, I believe we need to now consider. I'm just taking a quick overview of where we are. We need to start. Okay, so this is where I talked about starting an aircraft engine is no more complicated than starting your vehicle, and that is because we need power, we need electricity or spark, we need fuel, and we need compression / rotation. Okay, so I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to set this to engines so we can actually see some of that take place. On the Boeing aircraft, and when we start the Boeing aircraft, we, like the Airbus, we have to have APU bleed. Okay, so up to this point, APU bleed has air conditioning, heating, and cooling air has been coming to us via ground. There's been an air blower that's blowing air into the system to allow us to keep heating and cooling in this area. Now we're going to turn on the APU bleed because the APU is running, and when I turn on APU bleed, it is going to remove that air. And let me correct that again. I said that wrong. Up to this point, we've been using the APU air to do heating and cooling. But when I turn on APU bleed, it is going to isolate that air, and it will turn off, where are they? It will turn off the packs, so it'll stop the air from the APU going into the air conditioning, heating, and cooling system, and isolate that air for engine start. Okay, Boeing does the same thing. Their APU bleed is over here. Unfortunately, in the Boeing, you do have to manage packs and the isolation valve, which is up in here, Summers. You must turn the packs off, and you have to put the isolation valve to on. Okay, that then says no APU air is going to go to the heating and cooling, and it's now getting ready to use for engine start and only engine start. In the Airbus, it was simply as simple as pushing APU bleed. Okay, so here we are. We got the APU bleed. On the Boeing, Summers, in this location, you're going to have two starter switches, the right and the left starter switches. Okay, you're going to have another switch in the middle to use the igniter, whether you want to use a left igniter, a right igniter, or it's typically set for both. There's a series of switches, 3 switches, a toggle-like switch in the middle, and then 2 of these rotary dial switches, one on either end. I always start the right engine first, and then I start the left engine. Whether that's the right sequence, I'm not sure, but I just always start the right engine, okay? And we're going to do the same thing in the Airbus. Now, the Airbus system, up here, this is all we need to do up here. The rest of it, oh, sorry, take that back. We need to turn on our fuel pumps. Boeing's fuel pumps are in this area as well, so turn them all on. Now, we're going to come down here, assuming in the Boeing you've turned on that right starter switch. It is going to begin rotating the engine. In this case, I'm going to put on the igniter, and I'm going to turn that on. And when we go outside, we're going to start seeing that engine rotate. As you see it, it's rotating. Now, we're going to look here. We're going to see that our N1 is coming up. Our EGT is slowly rising. N2 is slowly rising as well. And eventually, there's a very distinct sound. I can hear it already. Let me turn the volume up just a bit. When this number starts to fall, you hear it? It's like it's slowly winding up. And as this number falls, this number continues to climb. Eventually, it's going to say available right there. I'm going to do that shortly. Usually 19, yeah, there it is, available. Okay, so that's one good engine start. Now, in the Boeing, what I like about the Boeing is up here, those starter switches, you hear a definitive click, and that means that engine is now started. And then you would click the second switch to start the second engine. As I said before, you typically will not start it here on the ramp, but I'm doing that just for this demonstration purposes because I'm not going to do a pushback. But we have engine number 1 started, and note that the generator has gone from fault to engaged. And so we have our batteries are full charged and we have power being generated here, okay? Now we're going to start the second engine, and it's as simple in the Airbus. Click that switch. In the Boeing, up there, click the second switch to start. Okay, so we're gonna again go here, and we're gonna be able to see this start coming up, and it's going to repeat the system. I'm not going to spend too much time with repeating the system. What I want to now go through and kind of talk about is after the engines are started, what do you do? What's the plan? Well, in the Airbus, we will set this to normal. In the Boeing, those starter switches up here will have a CONT option to them. You put them into that. That's continuous. This is continuous-ish in the Airbus. Should you get a flame out, it will try to restart the engines for you, okay? As far as the engines go, that's as far as you need to go, okay? I do believe these buttons, although they're not active, they are actually the buttons that should be pressed after you flip this switch to start this engine and to start this engine, but that button is not there. And I believe in 2024, those buttons will actually be there. In fact, I know they will be. So that will be yet another level of immersion that we'll be able to get to, okay? So the next thing that we want to do is, because we are on power here, and because we have air coming from the jet engines now, we no longer need the APU. We've got rid of the shore power or the ground power, but we don't need the APU, and we also don't need the APU bleed, right? So we're going to turn APU bleed off, and we're going to turn the APU off. This is still going to show available. Where is APU? So we're still producing power, and notice that we're not using any power from the APU, and that's because the jet engines are now providing all of the power that is required to keep the engines running. This is going to slowly wind its way down, and it's going to shut itself off. It does take a few moments to do that, but that's neither here nor there. Boeing, the same thing. You would go over to this side, you would turn the APU bleed off, you would turn the packs on to auto, and you would turn the isolation valve also to auto. So should you flame out, that would be set and ready to go, okay? All right. Now, before we conclude our video, right here, we want to look, and the Boeing has a similar layout as the Airbus in general, okay? And the difference in the Boeing is you have this row of panel buttons and doodabber switches, and then it has 2 here in the center, and then also this. The reason why I draw your attention to this is we want to look here, and we want to see, are there any lights that are kind of out of the ordinary, okay? So in the Boeing, I would scan this roll, I would scan this roll, I would scan this roll. In the Boeing, there's a number of things that I would make sure I'd have window heat on and all that kind of stuff. I do the same thing here, but we're not going to go through that level yet. But I want to make sure all of those things are on. If there are lights that are on that shouldn't be on, they're gonna stand out of place. You're going to look at that and go, why is that light on when I don't see anything else on like it? That's your problem. Address that, okay? In the Airbus, so far, I've only got one light on that shouldn't be on, and I know where it is. I've seen it all the way through this process, and I've purposely left it on so I can do this demonstration. Note that the APU is now gone off, and my suspicions are, I don't know if they got this graphically right. You still got a little bit of heat coming out of there. I was curious about that. But down here, we have this little light And if you were looking at this, you probably saw it as well. You probably said to yourself, well, what is that little orange light doing on? Well, both aircraft, I think, are very clever in this. It's a very intuitive thing for pilots to be able to kind of look over the overhead and kind of scan and look at it, go, hey, that's out of place, that's out of place, fix that, right? Well, this is the emergency lighting system, and it's no more complicated than to do that to fix it. But it's a good exercise for me to look up there and go, anything out of order? No, it all looks right. Because if something was out of order, for example, if you didn't have these all turned in their place, you would see a light that would indicate that for you. It would tell you that's not right. Okay, so we are here running flight plan in place. We've gone through this exercise. Mostly this exercise is directly transferable to the Boeing and or Boeing back to Airbus. Like I said before, I'm happy to do a companion video to this and showing the Boeing as well. It might be an interesting thing if I did that. Maybe I would potentially try to do a side-by-side. I think that would be an interesting video. It would take some work to do that. So if you're interested in seeing something like that in the comment section, I would be happy to do that and put it together for us so we could actually have it. It'd be a good archive. And I may actually just do it because I may do it. Right. Raymond for Stream Gamers. It's been fun. Look, I've said before, I'm trying to grow the channel. I'm trying to. My goals are small, not like some people's goals are. I'd love to be able to hit 1,000 subscribers. That's kind of what my goal is, to get 1,000 subscribers. So all those that are watching this, please help me get there. Help us get there. The channel is for everybody. So you have an idea, you have a thought. Nobody's idea is unimportant. Please put it out there. I'll do my level best to try to make sure that everybody's ideas are heard and understood. I'm looking for some leaders in YouTube in this environment to kind of help me move the channel forward. So if there are people out there that want to take part of this, let me know. We can converse. I have a Discord. It will be in the description. There'll be a link in the description. Channel's not very active, but it's not very active only because you're not there. Should you show up, it'll start getting active. That was good, actually. I like that. Anyways, Raymond, Stream Gamers, appreciate you all. Enjoy life. Have fun. Play games. Do all the wonderful things. Don't sweat the little things. The little things will take care of themselves. Take care of the big things in life. Family is the big one. Look after everybody and enjoy yourselves. And be kind. At the very, very core thing, be kind. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye now.